like basically half the SEC is still kind of in it. Like, in some cases minuscule, but they're not totally eliminated.
Yeah. No, I mean, Eli Drinkowitz was crowing about it after the game. I don't think Missouri's getting in the
I don't think
playoff,
they
but
are either, but the fact that they're
it could
not
happen.
totally out of it
South
is,
Carolina,
yeah.
South Carolina could make it. It's it's great. This
Yeah.
is awesome.
Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports, inspired by football legend Joe Namath. Embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in a new app coming soon.
Welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Matt Scalici, your producer, filling in for our regular host, Ben Flanagan. Thanks for joining us this week. We've got a lot to talk about. It was an exciting weekend for Alabama football. And we knew, as we discussed last week, coming in, this was a huge game. This was a season-defining game. And the season has now taken a markedly different direction for Alabama, coming out of this matchup in Baton Rouge, where Alabama had a definitive 42-13 victory over LSU. Here to talk about it with us, AL.com Alabama football beat writer Matt Stahl. So, Matt, this was a heavily hyped game. It was labeled as a must-win for Kalen DeBoer, not just for the 2024 season, but I think in a lot of ways for his fledgling tenure at Alabama. And he came through with, I think it's fair to say, flying colors. His team got the job done emphatically in this game. My first question for you is, how far does it look like this team has come since that Tennessee game, which does not feel that long ago?
A long way. Yeah. No, you sort of like at the very, very beginning of the game, first offensive play, they false start in the press box. So like, here we go again. You know, doing
big here we go energy at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Not the case. That was an anomaly, not the rule in that game. Jalen Milroe scores a touchdown on that drive, and then another one later on, and then one in the third quarter, and another one in the fourth quarter. And really, by that point, he'd outscored LSU by himself and didn't need the other Alabama touchdowns to help out at that point. So. It's night and day compared to that Tennessee game. Like Alabama just looked so much better prepared. The execution was so much better, just all around.
Well, and you say night and day, and I think if someone were to watch those two games, they would say, how is this the same team? There has been, I think, some incremental improvements in certain areas, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But I want to know from you, from watching this game, watching the Missouri game, and obviously everything that's happened this season, where do you see the most obvious market improvements in what this team is doing?
I think defense is definitely it. Like you saw in that Vanderbilt game, it just looked like they'd figured out Alabama and what Alabama does. But I mean, in these games, like especially LSU, like they couldn't figure out what Alabama was going to do the whole game. Like Brian Kelly was on the post-game podium, like complaining about blitz packages.
That's going to come up later. Yeah.
Yeah. To be clear on that, you'll also notice Garrett Nussmeier was still in the game with down 42-13. So like I don't know what Brian's complaining about here, but yeah, they confuse quarterbacks at this point. Running packages are looking different. It's execution is just a lot better. Yeah, it's the same thing. They seem like they're better prepared, and they seem like they're executing better.
Yeah, 6 of 14 on third downs allowed by this Alabama defense in this game, and it feels like not long ago we were talking about this the almost comedic quality of this team on third down when it comes to getting a stop. But they seem to have figured something out. Now, one of the things coming out of this game is this Alabama defense has already been absorbing a couple of injuries and losses. They lost another one in Q Robinson, who is done for the season after this game. But overall, are you seeing? Do you feel like this group is starting to have more guys turn into that star level player that, about a month ago we were saying these guys just don't have the juice. Maybe the talent just isn't there on defense this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the depth is kind of there. I think in Q's spot, you'll see Yanze Pierre kind of step up a little bit. Quay Russaw obviously has been and will continue to be. But then, they're doing some interesting things there as well. I think Jihad Campbell is, I mean, it's hard to even say he's their best inside linebacker because Deontay Lawson's really, really good. But, also, he might be their best defensive player at the moment, but they're also moving him out to that edge rusher. Kane Womack calls it the wolf spot. I almost hate humoring all these football coaches with their position names. He's an edge rusher.
Position names, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. He's been moving out to the edge, and then they have had rushing the passer some out there, and then Justin Jefferson obviously will jump into his spot. But yeah, I mean, there's Jihad's been looking good. Deshaun Jones looked really good, I think, in that LSU game when he came in due to some injuries in the secondary. But yeah, the depth, I think, has improved. Guys have part of it's too is just figuring the system out, right? You go from you've had some extra weeks, you've had a bye in between just to really. I mean, they knew what was going on, I think, when the season started, but just more and more learning the intricacies of it, and you can implement some little different things as players come along.
Yeah, kind of a highlight moment of this game, I think, was seeing the coordinators come down onto the field with quite a bit of time left on the clock in the game, just almost like, hey, we're just coming down to party with you guys. We did our job. And interesting to see that after, again, the last few weeks and a little before, hearing a lot of frustration in the fan base with this coaching staff, and particularly some of the blame coming down onto those coordinators. They walk off this field kind of triumphant heroes. But I want to ask you particularly about this game in specific, because there were, for sure, this is a talented LSU team. They have some really impressive wins this season. They beat an Ole Miss team that just beat Georgia this week. So nothing to dismiss. But there were a lot of strange factors going on in this game. There were obviously a laundry list of injuries for this LSU team coming into the game. And on top of it, it was raining pretty heavily for most of this game, Matt. And look, everybody had to play in the rain. It was an equal opportunity obstruction, but wouldn't you probably rather be the team that has an incredibly fast running quarterback when it's raining than being the guy who essentially is running an air raid offense at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially one thing I pointed out before the game on Garrett Nussmeier, one of their best offensive linemen was out. Obviously, it was Dellinger, who missed the game. I think he's going to be out this week too, but that doesn't matter. All of Nussmeier's touchdowns come when he's not under pressure. He's thrown one all season when he's been under pressure, and Alabama put it together to keep him under pressure the whole game. So he was making some ridiculous decisions back there. But yeah, absolutely. LSU had schemed it up like they'd never seen a quarterback with legs before. Alabama's offensive line has really come together. So, Jalen did what he does really, really well. And, the voodoo from the idiot governor's counterfeit tiger was too much to overcome.
Negligible effect on the game, for sure. I guess part of what I'm getting at here is, Matt, it's a big moment for the team, but is it also possible that the nature of this blowout has a lot to do with the specific matchups on the night? Is it deceiving to look at this and say, wow, Alabama's offense and defense have solved all their problems because of the fact that we're talking about a team in a specific situation where a lot was working against LSU in this game. And I'm not, for listeners, I'm not trying to take away from what Alabama did, but projecting forward to say is Alabama quote unquote good again? Is it potentially deceptive to say Alabama blew out LSU, therefore they've got it all figured out now?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, you look at the SEC all season, and it's very much just been the most like styles make fights football season in the history of like the league, to my knowledge. Like, there's
Just the
not
biggest
that.
weird round robin ever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you see it in like the standings at this point are enough to make you want to bring divisions back. Like, everybody's beating everybody, so like yes, like they blew out an LSU team that I think is good and beat Ole Miss and like all that. But yes, could Alabama also run into a team that just beats them one day, just like has what they do figured out better and is somehow able to execute? Yeah, like I mean, Oklahoma could be a dangerous team. I'm discounting Mercer. Nick Saban will have
I
to
think
forgive
that's
me
okay.
on this one.
I'll accept it.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody got screamed at in the press conference today for overlooking Mercer, which was not a different experience. But yeah, I mean Oklahoma's got a good team. Like, you don't think Hugh Freeze has been scheming up the Iron Bowl since like last Iron Bowl? Like, the man is like known, like his biggest coaching trait is he overlooks some games in service of the big ones. So like, yes, like it's still dangerous down the line. I don't think this is suddenly like a 2020, hey, name any of the joyless murder ball years where like they're just going to sit on everybody all season. That's not what college football is at this point.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bunch of teams at the top of the league right now, and it's been much discussed since this past Saturday that there is this sort of dream/nightmare scenario by which we have an 8-way tie at the top of the SEC. And a lot of times, I mean, look, it's a big discussion point among Alabama fans because in a lot of those scenarios being laid out, Alabama ends up being one of the two teams that wins that tiebreaker and gets to the SEC championship game. Uh, First of all, if you're putting yourself in the shoes of this program, Matt, do you even want that? If Alabama at this point, as a 2-loss team, seems like they're in pretty good shape to be one of the teams that makes it into the college football playoff, what is exactly the benefit of? I understand that winning that game gives you a first round bye and you're definitely in. Is it worth it? Is it ultimately worth it to play in that SEC championship game? Do you want to be there if you're Alabama?
I think you do because like I don't think coaches and players necessarily think like that, right? Like, they always want to be in the big game. They always
Yes.
want to be like playing for some kind of championship. So in like, yes, I think you do. And also it's one of those things like you really can't get yourself bogged down by like, oh, well, is it actually like you can't sandbag a game on the way
No,
there
of
to
course
like
not.
not play in the SEC
No,
championship game,
not
then you're
suggesting
not in
that
the
at all.
playoff either.
No, not suggesting
But
that at all. I think it's more of like if you're watching these games and saying, "Oh, I guess we need Missouri to win this one. We need Georgia to beat Tennessee." Like, is it? Does it even make that much of a positive difference to get into that game?
yeah, I mean, it probably if you you got to go win it. That's
Yeah.
the if you get in it, you better go like win the thing. You can't be. But I mean, if you do win, you get a week off, right? Like, you're probably going to be one of the top 4 seeds there as the champion. So like you get that week off. Probably end up what I think the SEC is tied to the Sugar Bowl somehow still with their champion in the semifinals, so or the quarterfinals. So you probably I don't know.
It's great.
I
It's
think
great that we know how all of this works now. No, I mean
yeah,
it
we
is.
were joking that there's a world where or early in the season when Georgia Tech like looked like they had an actual playoff spot. We're like, man, there's like this insane, bizarre world where Alabama plays in Atlanta in the SEC championship game, and then in Atlanta against Georgia Tech in the first round, and then in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl, and then in Atlanta for national championship game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I don't know how any of this works. Like maybe I think the answer to the original question might just be like you find out in a year whether or not it's good to be in the SEC championship game.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question, which is that one of the things, I mean, we had so many question marks about how this is all going to work and how it's going to feel coming into this season. I think one of the questions we are starting to have answered is, does this impact the regular season in a negative way? And I think the answer is a profound no. And in fact, the opposite. A game like this Alabama LSU game, nobody would have cared. The impact would have felt like nothing if this was a 4-team playoff era, because both of these teams would already definitely be out of the discussion for the playoffs. And instead, this was essentially an elimination game for the college football playoffs. And there's going to be a bunch more of those over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, this rocks. Like every college football game is like important for playoffs at the moment.
Yeah.
Like so many teams are still, like you saw there's this enormous list of teams that are still mathematically eligible for the playoffs, including, Alabama's first opponent, Western Kentucky, a great, group of 5 football program attached to like potentially America's finest academic institution.
But also, as we said, like basically half the SEC is still kind of in it. Like, in some cases minuscule, but they're not totally eliminated.
Yeah. No, I mean, Eli Drinkowitz was crowing about it after the game. I don't think Missouri's getting in the playoff. I
don't think they are either, but the fact that they're not totally out of it.
South Carolina could make it. It's great. This is awesome. Like, it was the flaw of the 14 playoff is, like, obviously once there was a playoff, we were going to make everything in the sport, like, cater around, like, the playoff as far as discussions go, but like it wasn't big enough that like every team could potentially make it. Now I think they're going to screw up the playoff at some point. Like I hate conference auto bids at this point. Like that sounds horrendous, but that's capitalism, I suppose.
We all knew that people are going to still get mad about it regardless. I think the issue is it keeps more fans engaged in what's going on, and it makes more games matter, even in a peripheral way, even in as we just said, for Alabama fans, you have to watch all these other games if you care about whether they're going to get in the SEC championship game or not, because it's boosting. I mean, Alabama, we have not mentioned this stat yet, but something that you and your colleague over at AL.com have been touting today is Alabama has 4 wins against ranked opponents right now, which is far and away the best of any team in college football right now. It's sort of reminding me of the shift from pre-BCS, and I know you were a tiny child when this happened, Matt, but like in the old times,
wasn't alive.
In the old times, it was just like, okay, it's literally just going to be whatever a bunch of people think who gets to play in the title game. Now with the BCS, like strength of schedule matters. You have to care about Air Force beating Wyoming or something. And it's shifted more and more in that direction as the things have become more complicated. And in some ways, it's becoming a little more college basketball like. But I think ultimately what it's doing is it's making more games matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Alabama fans right now are like nervous over whether SMU is going to win the ACC and steal a spot. Like it's great. Like, I don't know. I mean, to be clear, I'm not on team BCS. My stance on the matter is we should not have a national championship at all. But that's sort of getting a little radical out there.
This is a wildly unpopular opinion, Matt.
If they're not going to do that, well, I'm right. So like I'll be unpopular.
I just want to remind you that you're saying this to a fan base that I would say arguably cares more about national championships than any other fan base in college sports.
I know, but the coolest part about college football is beat your rival, win your conference. Like, to me, that should be the end all be all of it. But I understand I'm in the minority on that. In lieu of that, this rocks. This is like about as good as I think you can get as far as determining a national champion.
And for any like league championship in sports, it's fun. It's fun when more teams are involved in the race, I think. And I'm saying that as a guy who watched the years of Alabama versus Clemson over and over and over again and thought it was great too. This is also cool. This is fun to see. Matt, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but to dig into this specific rivalry, which I think I and many others wondered whether it would still have heat and juice in the post Saban world, because so much of this rivalry is built around Nick Saban. This one did feel like it had some heat to it, I think, in the buildup and in the aftermath, even with it being a blowout. LSU fans, my perception is they were very fired up about this game. They cared a lot about it beyond just their own hopes for their team, which is what rivalry is about, right? It's not about you want to win, it's you want to make them lose. That's what a rivalry is. And yeah. Brian Kelly was emotional. He was fired up and in his feelings in this game. And you mentioned earlier, he was during the game, a lot of people have spotted, people who are talented lip readers, I would say, have pointed out that he was complaining to the officials that Alabama was blitzing at the end of the game as he attempted to score a garbage time touchdown with his starters on the field. And then he brought it up again in the post-game press conference. This still feels, I mean, you were closer to this than me. You were at the game. What was the atmosphere like before it became obvious that these LSU fans were going to be walking to the parking lot in the rain?
It was unbelievable. Like, it's one of the coolest like college football atmospheres I've ever been in. It was my first time at Tiger Stadium.
Oh, so, wow, that's great.
Yeah, no, it was cool. But I mean, then at the end of the third quarter, they played Call in Baton Rouge, and I like took a video of it, sent it to my dad. He's like, seems like it's normally more exciting than that.
I would say that the exodus had already begun by that point, it seems like.
Yes. Shout out to T News columnist Chase Goodbread for they're storming the parking lot.
Really, really good tweet from
that
Chase
was that was just incredible work. But yeah, I mean, this is Nick Saban didn't want to play this game every year. And for the first time in the history, I think, of this podcast, I will say Nick Saban can kick rocks.
He was not correct about that. This game matters. This is a.
You'd rather
rivalry.
Play Mississippi State every year? Like, come on. Like, I understand as the Alabama football coach, like, historically you would probably rather go get another win over Mississippi State, but like, come on, no, don't. That needs to be like, they got to play this game every year. It's still like, yeah, it's great.
It should be protected, and we still don't know how things are going to work going forward. I have gone on the record saying I don't like this. I don't like the rotational schedule. I understand that the point of it is we want everybody to play everybody more frequently. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it at the expense of, and I know some people don't care about this, Alabama versus Ole Miss is a game that I don't feel right that it's not happening this year. There is an emptiness in this season for me because that game isn't there. And even Mississippi State, who I know they're terrible. We all know how that game would end. But continuity does matter to me, and tradition matters to me in college football. And I really, really hope that they do protect Alabama LSU. I think this is an important rivalry, and it has a unique feel to it. And LSU fans absolutely hate Alabama. And so Alabama fans care about this game, and it goes beyond the conference race and the playoff race, and it is a one game season in and of itself, and that is what college football needs to protect above all else. I'm with you on that, at least in terms of the discussion about championships.
Yeah.
Just a quick thing, because we brought it up last week, though. As far as Brian Kelly goes, not a good look, right? I mean, we
Mm,
talked about that there was some grumbling down there already. When you lose a game this way, I don't know that there's a good thing you can say, but I think complaining that the other team was still trying when you still were is a pretty bad look.
yeah, no, it's not great. Brian, I think because last year too he was complaining about the refs after the game. Do you remember he wanted Dallas Turner booted for the hit on Daniels there that knocked
Oh,
him out
right,
of the
sure,
game with the
yes.
concussion, which he had more of a point there. But yeah, it's just I don't know. He just seems completely just juiceless as a as an LSU coach. I hate the whole fit. I think is a sort of overrated thing with college football coaches. But the man doesn't fit at all. He's in a fan base that has no patience. Like Les Miles won a national championship. Ed Ogeron. These are
Ed
not coaches
Orgeron.
who these are not coaches who are going to can be in the College Football Hall of
No,
Fame. They won national championships because they inherited really good infrastructure that Nick Saban built.
which
Brian
is
Kelly
still
was
there, which
supposed,
is still mostly there.
yeah, which he fixed their program on a pretty permanent level. Though with NIL and whatnot, he goes to one of I think two schools where they kind of recruit themselves among certain it's LSU and Notre Dame where kids will go to the school, not necessarily the coach, and he's kind of screwed up. He hadn't won the big one at either of them. Uh, yeah, he does. There's a great tweet I wish I could credit, but it's Brian Kelly speaking to a meeting of LSU boosters, where it's we're going to win the right way, and LSU boosters be like, oh no, you're not. It's just yeah, I don't know. And I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good coach who has a history of building really good staffs. Um, but I mean, next year's gonna be make or break for him, right?
I think it might
It's
be. I think it
you
might
better
be.
go win yourself a natty.
Yeah, and just interesting too. I mean, we've talked on this show about Kalen DeBoer's sort of totally even keel all the time, which I think is sometimes a negative too. I think it's not what people want to see when they themselves feel like things aren't going well. And I think what's weird about Brian Kelly is he is a very fiery, emotional guy, but it seems like it's only after the fact. It seems like during the game, every time they would show him on camera, he looked uh, kind of stunned. He looked frozen, like he didn't know how to respond to what was happening. And I think that's particularly not what you want to see as a fan base.
Yeah,
You'd at least like to see your guy screaming if it's not going well, I think. But
it's kind of the opposite of Kalen too,
yeah,
because Kalen, he's never gonna be anything but even keel in the press conference, the interview, whatever.
but
But
when
boy,
they're
howdy,
winning,
when they
yeah,
when they had that little snafu with the getting knocked out of field goal range by the too many or not they let the play clock run out. Yeah, it was delay of game.
yeah.
Boy, he didn't seem real thrilled at that point. You see, he'll go at it with the refs if he doesn't like it. He's got the fire when I think he needs it on the sideline. I think there was sort of a yeah. I mean, after the Vanderbilt game, I think there was sort of a mistaken perception that he is like he is in a press conference all the time, and it's just not the case. You can bring the fire, in the actual moments where he's coaching.
It is very interesting to continue to learn about this guy and get a fuller picture of what the Kalen DeBoer version of Alabama football is going to look like. We're going to continue to learn about that as we get into the postseason. It's shaping up to be an interesting and exciting last month of the regular season, Matt. And we will be documenting it here on Beat Everyone. And obviously, people can follow your coverage of it over on AL.com. So thanks for joining us to break down the game, Matt.
Oh yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Well, you can find Beat Everyone, as everyone here knows, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review. That really helps us out with the show. I'm Matt Scalici. For Ben Flanagan, our normal intrepid host, who will be back next week. Thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you guys a week from now.
Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports, inspired by football legend Joe Namath. Embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in a new app coming soon.